Let's be honest. Horror movies should scare us, but instead they keep doing the same tired tricks over and over again. You've seen them, you rolled your eyes at them, and somehow they're still happening. Horror tropes aren't always a bad thing, though, but today I want to focus on the ones that are laughably obvious and desperately awful. So join me as we rank the top 5 horror tropes that need to stop now on this episode of Ranking Rumble. Welcome back to WWH. My name is Andrew Dreamer. Horror tropes are in every movie. Now, I think most of us know what horror tropes are, but just in case, I'll give you a quick rundown. Horror tropes are recurring ideas or situations that show up again and again in scary movies. They're like familiar patterns the audience instantly recognizes. Things like the final girl, the creepy kid, the haunted house, things like that. These tropes aren't automatically bad. In fact, they exist because they work. They tap into common fears and help quickly set up tension. But when they're used too often or without any merit, they can start to feel predictable or cliche, which takes away from their effectiveness. At their best, horror tropes are tools. Filmmakers either lean into them for comfort and nostalgia or subvert them to surprise the audience, which is often where the most memorable horror movie moment will come from. Back to today's topic now. The worst of the worst. The tropes that are just dumb, flat out stupid. Let's talk about those because I think they need to stop.
Stop it. Get some help.
They're just not good. Maybe they're ridiculous, maybe they're so overused that they mean nothing anymore, or maybe I just hate them. Regardless, these 5 are what I think of as the worst. And make sure you stick around for the whole video because I'm not just going to list these tropes off. I'm going to give examples of them in movies and explain why I think they're so bad. But before we dive into all that, be sure to body slam that subscribe button and drop kick the like button as hard as you possibly can to make sure you never miss out on any of the hard-hitting, chill-inducing 5-star matches we have here at WWH. On that note, it is bell time now, so grab your popcorn and make your way to your seat. Let's head down to the ring. Starting us off at number 5 is the car won't start. The car won't start trope is one of horror's most recognizable tension devices, and also one of its most eye-roll inducing when handled poorly. The setup is simple. A character escapes immediate danger, jumps into a car, fumbles with the keys, and nothing. The engine sputters, stalls, or refuses to turn over entirely, usually until the killer is inches away. In theory, it's meant to stretch out suspense in a relatable situation. In practice, though, it often feels less like organic tension and more like the story hitting a pause button to keep the character in danger. You can see versions of this trope pop up across decades of horror. In Friday the 13th Part 2, Jenny's car won't start as she's trying to get away. In Jeepers Creepers, Derry and Trish have trouble getting the car into gear. Hell, the entire premise of Cujo is predicated upon the idea that the car won't start. Granted, a lot of these do have logical reasons behind them, but that doesn't change the point that I'm trying to make here. The point is that while these scenes can be effective in the moment, they've also cemented the trope as something audiences now see coming a mile away. The biggest issue with the trope is just how convenient it feels. Cars don't typically fail at the exact second a killer appears, at least not with the uncanny consistency horror movies suggest. When it happens repeatedly across films, it stops feeling like bad luck and starts feeling like lazy writing. Instead of building tension through character choices or atmosphere, the story relies on mechanical failure as a shortcut. That predictability drains the scene of real suspense because we're no longer wondering if the car will fail, we're just waiting for it to happen. And it also undermines the character agency. A strong horror scene often comes from characters making difficult decisions under pressure. But the car won't start trope removes that entirely. The character doesn't fail because of a mistake, a fear, or a flaw. They fail because the script demands it. That can make the danger feel artificial, as if the characters never really had a chance to escape in the first place. At its worst, the trope becomes almost comedic. Audiences have been conditioned to expect the engine to stall, the keys to drop, or the ignition to lag just long enough for the villain to catch up. It's insanely overused. I guarantee we could all name 30 movies where this happens, and it's not inherently broken, but without a fresh twist or a realistic setup, it risks just turning the tension into predictability. Coming in at number 4 is the phones conveniently don't work. This trope reaches peak absurdity when the failure of technology feels almost comically timed. This one can be rectified slightly because there are numerous ways you can get around phones in certain situations, like in Wrong Turn or the Hills Have Eyes remake, where the location itself is a dead zone for cell service. Or you might have a situation like in Get Out where Georgina continuously unplugs Chris's phone to make sure the battery stays dead. In the Halloween movies, Michael cuts phone lines several times to ensure that no one can call for help. These are just examples of when it makes sense. There are numerous examples where this isn't the case and there is actually no logic involved. The reason this trope is so problematic is that it undercuts realism for the sake of convenience. In real life, someone would likely find a way to call for help, alert authorities, or at least leave the area, but horror films often ignore this to maintain tension. Over time, it becomes predictable and even laughable. Audiences instinctively anticipate that the phone won't work, which ironically can reduce suspense rather than increase it. It also reinforces a form of narrative laziness instead of creatively finding new ways to isolate characters. Filmmakers often rely on the same cliche, leaving the story feeling contrived. In short, the phones don't work trope is a double-edged sword. While it can heighten fear and make characters feel isolated, it's overused to the point of predictability. Not to mention, its reliance on convenient technical failures can pull audiences out of the story instead of immersing them in it. This particular trope is only slightly higher than the last one because I find that there are more examples of a logical reason that phones don't work than cars not working. Regardless, I would like to see this horror trope done away with. Next up at number 3, we have Hello. Is anyone there? This trope is one of the most recognizable and overused tactics in horror films, often serving as a shortcut to build tension. In this scenario, a character ventures into a dark, isolated space and calls out, usually in a trembling voice, "Hello? Is anyone there?" The expectation is that some unseen presence will either respond in a terrifying way or that silence will amplify the tension. It's simply an auditory cue that signals both the character and the audience that something dangerous is lurking. But because it's been repeated so often across the decades, it's become a hallmark of lazy suspense. This happens in numerous films such as Insidious, The Conjuring, and Poltergeist. The audience, conditioned by decades of repetition, instantly knows what's coming, even if they don't know precisely when. Now, what really pisses me off the most about this trope is just how stupid it makes characters look sometimes. Look, I get these movies are fictional and sometimes these characters aren't aware of what's going on, so they tend to investigate things. But come on, it's just absurd. Maybe it's just me, but if I hear a strange noise outside my house, I'm not asking who's there. I'm going in stealth like a damn Navy SEAL or something. Again, maybe that's just me, but to me, it's a poor storytelling device because it prioritizes cheap scares over narrative depth. It relies on the audience's jumpiness rather than meaningful tension, and it often signals a lack of imagination in crafting suspense. I don't even know if this will make sense, but it creates artificial tension rather than building it organically. It just gets to the point where you see it so many times in increasingly ridiculous ways that the trope not only loses its impact, but also risks pulling viewers out of the story. It turns what should be a moment of fear into a predictable, almost comical routine. And I don't know. I just want to see some new ideas in horror movies and stop relying on the same shit every time. Coming in at number 2, we have tripping while running away. Admittedly, my anger with this trope comes from my brain telling me that I could do better. Truth is, I have no idea, but this truly borders on infuriation for me. It really does. Look, I get it. Shit happens. People trip sometimes, and some people are more clumsy than others. But come on, seriously, it's just insane to me. You know what I'm talking about. A character is sprinting at full speed from a killer and the music is peaking, the tension is sky high, and then boom, out of nowhere they eat it. No obstacle, no clear cause, just a perfectly timed stumble that exists purely to let the killer catch up.
Oh, I fell over! Oh, I fell over again!
It's meant to heighten suspense, obviously, but more often than not, it feels like the movie just hitting pause on logic to keep the plot moving. It shows up in all kinds of movies from Halloween, Friday the 13th, I Know What You Did Last Summer. The list goes on and on. The problem with this trope is that it undermines both the tension and the character's credibility. Fear should come from the threat itself, the relentless killer, the unknown lurking danger, not from characters suddenly losing coordination like they've never ran before. When someone trips for no reason, it feels less like a natural mistake and more like the script stepping in to force vulnerability. Instead of thinking that could happen to me, the audience starts to then think that wouldn't happen to anyone. Worse, it often makes characters look incompetent in situations where survival instincts should be at their peak. In real life, adrenaline tends to sharpen focus and physical response, not randomly sabotage it. So when characters repeatedly fall in perfectly safe conditions, it creates a disconnect between the audience and the story. Rather than immersing viewers in the terror, it pulls them out, reminding them that they're watching something manufactured. At its best, horror thrives on believability, even in the most fantastical scenarios. But the tripping while running away trope does the opposite. It replaces organic suspense with artificial delay, and once you notice it, it becomes impossible to unsee. Instead of making scenes scarier, it often turns them into an eye roll, and that's the last thing a movie wants during a life or death chase. Our number 1 entrant today is splitting up for no reason. Yep, this is the one. This one infuriates me beyond all others. This one is the dumbest and most ridiculous horror trope of all time, in my opinion. It usually pops up when a group of characters is faced with a dangerous or unknown situation, and instead of sticking together for safety, they decide to divide into smaller groups or even go off alone. And there's rarely a logical reason for it. No urgency, no strategy, just a casual, hey, you go that way, I'll go this way. As if they're just searching for the car keys instead of trying to survive something horrific. As much as I love The Thing, I think it's stupid for them to split up as much as they do in that movie. In House on Haunted Hill, people split up all the damn time. I mean, there are so many others. The Descent, The Green Inferno, Prometheus, The Strangers, Friday the 13th, even Cabin in the Woods makes fun of this trope. And here's a perfect example of it. Every single Scooby-Doo episode ever. The gang, despite consistently and constantly encountering danger, still defaults to their classic split-up routine. And yeah, this is played more for nostalgia than realism here, but the logic still falls apart when that threat becomes genuinely dangerous. The biggest issue with this trope is that it feels completely unnatural. When people are scared, their instinct is usually to stay together. There's safety in numbers, shared awareness, and a better chance of survival. Splitting up without a clear, urgent reason contradicts basic human behavior, which immediately makes the characters feel less believable. Instead of empathizing with them, the audience starts questioning their intelligence. It also kills tension rather than building it. A well-crafted horror scene should make you feel like danger is closing in no matter what the characters do. But when they split up for no reason, it creates an artificial setup where the audience can predict exactly what's going to happen next. Isolation, vulnerability, and an inevitable attack. That predictability drains the fear out of the moment and replaces it with just pure, unadulterated frustration. Ultimately, the splitting up trope is less about storytelling and more about convenience. It allows filmmakers to isolate characters and stage scares more easily, but at the cost of logic and immersion. When overused or poorly justified, it turns what should be an absolutely terrifying situation into something just absurd, where the real question isn't, will they survive, but why would they ever think this was a good idea in the first place? But there you have it. Those are the top 5 horror tropes that need to stop now. What did you think about my list, and what are your least favorite horror tropes? Let me know down in the comments below. Ultimately, this is all subjective. What bothers me may not bother you, and that's okay. We're allowed to have our own opinions on these things, and honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. More than anything, I just want writers and filmmakers to be more creative, come up with new ideas and new ways to get characters into these situations. We've seen the same tricks used over and over and over again. It's time for a refresh, or at least some creative storytelling to explain why these characters are behaving the way they do. I don't think that's too much to ask for. Now that we've talked about the worst horror movie tropes, why don't you check out my last video? And you can do that by clicking the video that's appearing on your screen now. And remember, in the squared circle of horror, there are no countouts for nightmares. My name is Andrew Dreamer, and this is Wrestling with Horror.